It is kind of based on the moth. So what we did was we invited people from the community, you, to develop a 10-minute story, a story that is compelling and honest about your lives that you can share on stage. And what I have the good fortune to do is to work with each of the storytellers to kind of workshop what they're going to say and how they're going to present it and make it a story rather than a lecture, that kind of thing. And so we have a lot of fun with it. So I've been really pleased with the community outcry. I have so many people waiting for an opportunity to get on stage, which is exciting. So if you'd like to be a storyteller, Woods Hole does it usually in April and in September. We also have done it dinner theater at the Quicks Hole with Beth Colt, which has been great fun. And last year we had the good fortune of moving to the Falmouth Museum's on the Green, because we're getting so busy at the theater company. The stage was too busy for us to do it in September, so we moved to the Museum's on the Green. So that's a little bit about the storytelling. As I said, Woods Hole is getting really busy with their theater. We've got talk radio coming up in October, which is going to be awesome, by Eric Bogosian. I don't know if you know the show. You've probably seen the movie. It's about a talk jock, and it's kind of timely, even though it's a 30-year-old play. That should be a lot of fun. And then I'm doing weekend comedy, which is just crazy, silly fun next March. And it's only got 4 characters in it, 2 couples that accidentally rented the same cabin for the weekend. And one is in their 60s and one is in their hormonal 20s. So it's an interesting mix. They decide to try to share the unit. It doesn't go well. So come and see that. It should be great fun. And of course, we'll have Tales and Anecdotes in September. So enough about that. We have 7 tellers for you. I would love very much to introduce you tonight to my very good friend, Mary Chris Kenney, who has done theater with me for the last 30 years. And she's a terrific storyteller. So she will be first up. She's here with her husband and her pup. I love it that the dogs can come to storytelling. Come on up, Mary Chris.
Boy, thank you very much. It's so nice to be among friends on this beautiful Friday night. Thank God it's Friday. TGIF. And most Friday nights, if you frequent Mashpee Commons, you'd find me sitting on this stool. Not a bad guess. Let's say that you're eating rice and it's rolled with nori and some raw fish. Asia, give that girl a cigar. Oh, no more cigars. We don't do that anymore. So we're going back in time now. What kind of stories do you think it would be telling sitting at a sushi bar? Well, back when I was dating my husband, you know, you get talking about, well, what did you do before you met me? Let me see, it kind of reminds me of a song. You can't always get what you want. Can't always get what you want. But you try sometimes and you find, get what you need. Yep, that kind of sums up the 70s for me. Yeah, the 70s were the time. Oh yes, honey, what did you do back then? Well, let's see. What I remember, I remember selling lingerie at Filene's, and I drove a school bus, the hardest job I've ever had in my life. And I climbed some mountains in Switzerland. That wasn't a job, but it felt like it at the time. Let's see. Oh, I raced boats over Martha's Vineyard, and he goes, wait. Next thing you're gonna tell me that you were a mud wrestler. Heart be still. How did you know? The 70s. Remember the 70s? Disco? Saturday Night Fever. Da-da-da-da. That's what's going on. And they had the mechanical bulls because of Urban Cowboy. Yeah, Well, some nightclubs decided it would be a good idea to have female mud wrestling. I never tried that before. I saw the sign, female mud wrestlers wanted. I really didn't want my name attached to the fact that I was going to try female mud wrestling. So I went in as my alias, Crystal Kendrick. She was my alias. I used her when, remember we had air guitar for air guitar contest. So good enough. Crystal Kendrick checking out the mud wrestling facility. So I went into the basement of this place. It was Timothy's too in Framingham, in case you're wondering. And they had a sandbox there in the middle of the nightclub filled with mud. And of course, the clientele was 95% young men. Well, that's not too bad. I was 23 at the time. It's a hell of a way to meet a guy, but who knows? So I went up to the guy who identified himself as the referee, Kevin. I said, Kevin, so what's this all about? What do I have to do? Do I have to dress sexy or something? He goes, no, Crystal. All you have to do is wear a pair of these gym shorts here and a t-shirt. And then, what about the wrestling part? I mean, who would I wrestle around here? Looking at the mostly men. He said, oh, no. It would be another woman. And we would make sure that she was the same weight and height you are. Okay. That didn't sound too bad. So who would it be? He goes, that girl over there. Yeah, it's her name, Donna. Yeah, she's here celebrating her 25th birthday. Yeah, to me it looked like Donna had been celebrating her birthday most of the day. So things looked really good. He said, yeah, so the idea is all you have to do is pin her 3 times in 5 minutes, and you get $50. 3 times, 5 minutes, you're on. That's it. And he goes, yep. And he goes, yep. Donna, come over here. All you girls gotta do is, it's wrestling. This is the time of Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. Remember, wrestling was the big thing back there in the 70s. She said, so what you gotta do, girls, is when you get done pinning each other, and really do it up, okay? I want you to grab my legs and throw me down in the mud, too. Okay, Kevin, whatever you say. I was kind of wondering what I got myself into anyway, but hey, Crystal Kendrick was still up for it. So needless to say, I was going to demonstrate it, but since this mic won't allow me to get down on my knees and show you what it's like to be facing off with another woman in a sandbox full of mud, that's what it is. You get facing them, and then they hit the gong, ding, and down went Donna. And she's up like a little weeble, and boom, down. 2 times down. Seconds going, not even up to a minute or 2. Boom! 3 times down. The winner, Crystal Kendrick. Woo! Okay, we grab Kevin by the legs, drop him into the mud, cover him over really good, and that's it. And Donna staggers off to be with her friends, and I think I'm home clear till I feel this hand on my shoulder, and I look around, and as they say, I saw a mountain, this time a mountain of a woman, who said to me, I'll wrestle ya. You know, when they say she was 6 by 6 by 6, that was it. And of course, what was her name? Tiny. I'll wrestle ya. I'm like, well, that's okay, Tiny. I'm all done now. I am. I said, well, and she turns to the crowd, and she says, I'll wrestle any one of you. So I skedaddled out of there, getting to the homemade showers they had in the back room to get all the mud out of my ears and nose and eyes and such. But I backed out there and watched Tiny move around the crowd, picking out her victim, a guy who said he'd wrestle her, this tall, lanky guy. Well, needless to say, I have to tell you, the last vision I saw of Tiny with this guy, you gotta imagine this. She had the guy behind her neck, and she was doing one of these. She was spinning him around, and she tossed him out into the crowd. So, I was glad it wasn't me. I got washed up, and I made my way out, and referee Kevin stopped me and said, "Crystal, you know, you were really good out there. How'd you like to make a habit of this?" I'm like, "Kevin, you got my $50? He's like, "Yeah." He goes, "Yo, so?" I said, "How'd you like to make a habit of this? We're changing to Jell-O next week." I'm like, "No thanks, Kevin. You know, I got a philosophy of life. I say that life is like a buffet table. I mean, you can go around once and sample everything, and there's some things that you come back for seconds. Unfortunately, Kevin, mud wrestling is not the one I'm coming back for seconds." So what I have to say to you folks tonight, the moral of this story, and the moral I told my darling husband, who's here now, why you venture into mud wrestling, is because life is short. I know that as a hospice home health aide now. And you gotta grab, like the ad says, all the gusto that you can. And just go out and do something different. Do something that scares you. Take an alias. Just do it. I mean, it doesn't have to be mud wrestling.
Miss Kendrick, come to the principal's office. Okay, so now we have attorney Steve Kramer. Are you out there? He's got a wonderful story for you. He's been on our stage once before. Please welcome back, straight from fantasy camp, Steve Kramer.
Speaking of the 70s, it was 1977, I believe, that the age of free agency for Major League Baseball players started. Back the first time when the millionaires started getting paid that kind of money. I was only 24 years old. I was a Red Sox fanatic, but I was also a law student at the time, and I was becoming more and more interested in consumer protection, helping people out. So I remember that Bill Campbell, some of you might remember, was the first free agent that the Red Sox actually signed in 1977. 5 years, $1 million. And coincidentally, right after they signed Campbell, within a week or two, the bleacher tickets went from $1.50 to $2. And that began my career in consumer protection. Because when opening day came, a couple of months later, I took an old bed sheet. I spread it on the rug in my apartment in Brighton and spray painted, "Sell Campbell, bring back $1.50 bleachers." Now actually I made two signs. The second sign was the rug itself, but unfortunately the landlord never saw that. I took that sign on opening day, and with a friend I went to Fenway Park very early, and I taped it with masking tape to the wall in back of the center field bleachers. And for the first 6 innings, that sign got no attention at all. Everybody, understandably, is watching the game. Ferguson Jenkins was pitching for the Red Sox. The Red Sox were winning. The pitcher for Cleveland at that point, believe it or not, was Dennis Eckersley, who they were winning, who they were beating. But in the 7th inning, everything changed because the brand new $1 million reliever for the Red Sox came in, Bill Campbell, and he proceeded to blow the game, and he lost. A few more people during the 7th and 8th innings started to look up at the sign and say, that must be that guy. So I went home, went back to Brighton, looked at the paint all over the rug, and turned on the TV just to watch the highlights and the lowlights of how the Red Sox had lost that day. Well, there wasn't much of a reporting on what happened in the game. It was all fans start new era of protesting free agency. And all 3 of the Boston stations were talking about how there was a sign in center field talking about protesting that Bill Campbell, the new millionaire, had blown the game. The next day, the Herald the Globe, and for some of you who may remember it, the Record American. Huge stories about the fact that the fans were upset about the fact that the Red Sox were paying this kind of money. Did it mention me? No. Was there a picture of the sign? No. Well, I felt a little bit bad about the fact that Campbell was the one who was getting all the ire for what had happened. I didn't mean it against him. I just wanted to protect consumers. So I decided, and then they had an interview with Campbell, and he said, look, I don't resent the fact that people have a right to protest. I wish there was this picture of it in the paper. There's no pictures. So I got an idea. And the next day, it was sleeting out. It was raining like crazy. I knew that the game would get canceled. So I put on a jacket and tie, probably the only one I had during law school, and I went down to the Fenway Motor Inn, right in back of Fenway Park, because I knew the players all stayed there. And like Dustin Hoffman asking for Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate, I went right up to the counter and said, I'd like to see Mr. Campbell. And they said, is he expecting you? And I said, oh, absolutely. I said, would you like to call him up? I said, sure. I lost his number. Can you give me his number? I called him upstairs. He answered the phone. And I said, Bill, my name's Steve Kramer. I'm the one that put up the sign the other day. I noticed in the paper that you had wanted to have a picture of it, and there were no pictures. So I've gone one step better, and I've actually got the sign, and I want to give it to you. He said, well, that's great. You can drop it off at Fenway. I said, no, I'm downstairs. You can come down and meet me. And believe it or not, he came downstairs in about 10 minutes. I had a great meeting with him. He told me about the reasons he had signed with the Red Sox. He had only been offered about a $7,500 raise from Minnesota the year before. He was a Vietnam vet with a decorated history. And we actually kept in touch for the next year and a half, and he got me tickets a couple of times. And he was a great guy. Flash ahead about 20 years to 1998. I and about 60 other wish I could have beens and wanted to be's went to a Red Sox fantasy camp down in Fort Myers, Florida. See, it still fits a little bit. And it was a great, barely, that's right. It's enough out of you. And then what happened was we were all picked. I was picked by Bernie Carbo and Bill Lee, who are my coaches for the week. Carl Yastrzemski greeted us there. And lo and behold, who was one of the first people that I met there but Bill Campbell, who was there as a pitching scout for the White Sox at the time. We spent some time talking about it. And what was terrific is the first game that we got to play, Yastrzemski was watching the game with his agent because his agent's son was put on our team. And the game started. I went out to left field. And I can still remember looking in at the bleachers and seeing Carl Yastrzemski sitting in the bleachers. And I said, you got to be kidding me. Carl Yastrzemski sitting in the bleachers watching me play left field. I got to hold on to this for a few minutes. I went in the first time up, line drive, base hit. The other team got up, first inning, caught a nice fly ball in left field. And as I ran in triumphantly into the bench, I see Yastrzemski and his agent starting to walk away. So I go up to him and says, yes, what are you doing? It's only the first inning. And he said, I've checked it out. There's absolutely no talent here whatsoever. My day in the sun turned into a solar eclipse. My heart sunk like the Titanic, and I probably struck out the next time, but it was fun. Anyway, the highlight of the week, by far, is the last day of camp when the players get a chance to play against the pros. It's only about 4 innings, and you only get about 1 at bat. So I waited patiently, and in the 3rd inning, it was my time. Gaylord Perry, who some of you might remember, was pitching for the Giants. I got in there, I dug in, I got ready, he stared in for his signal, I stared out at him, and then there was a timeout. I said, what is this? What, are they going to stop the game before I get the hit? And over the loudspeakers, there was an announcement. Now pitching for the pros, number 22, Bill Campbell. Oh my God. Well, Campbell takes his few warm-ups, and then he stares in to get the signal. I stare back at him. He throws that first pitch, and it went 2 feet behind my head. I glared out at Campbell. He glared in at me. And then everybody between Campbell and I and everybody else on both teams started laughing hysterically because they knew exactly what the whole thing was all about. There's a moral to this story, too, and that is it's great to be a fan. It's great to get into consumer protection. But if you do, and you take it to the next step, and you start putting up signs, someday there may be a payback. And I learned that when it comes to a payback, payback is a pitch.
I love that he threw that dryer ball. That's about my speed. Now I'd like to welcome Lee Drescher, who is not only my friend and former tennis player partner when I would play, but a wonderful storyteller. Come on up, Lee.
Hi. Can I lower?
Yeah.
I'll go here a little bit and then there's a little bit of red that's going to be a bell.
Bit of a mechanic. Okay, that's good. When I was little, my grandmother told me that I should be good. And I've always tried to be good. In fact, in my younger years, I was quite timid. I'm still quite timid. And when my children were young, I kind of got houseophobia, and I just like to stay home with them. And we only had one car, and I just let my husband take it, and I would cart my kids around on a bicycle, which was probably more dangerous than a car, or walk them around town. But then my kids grew older, and they needed to be driven, and I drove in carpools, and I drove back and forth to the Cape from Boston, and I drove everywhere, so I really had to get into that car and drive. And all of a sudden, I discovered that I could drive, and I could make good time on the road. It was my philosophy that you should just get wherever you're going as fast as you can. However, the policemen sometimes stop me. And I do honor our policemen. I believe in the blue, but sometimes when they stop you on the road, they aren't so nice. Well, the speeding tickets began to pile up, and I got to hiring lawyers, but what I discovered is when you go into the hearing, even though they take it off your insurance, they still keep it in a pile. And my pile got to be about this big, with about 30, I now have 36 speeding tickets. That was over a period of 20 or 30 years, though. Really only one a year. Although on a couple, one or two trips, I got two on one trip. But anyway, and I also know a lot of courthouses in the area. Stoughton has kind of an old court. Brockton has a really nice new courthouse. The guy in Wareham, he's a very nice guy, and he usually lets you off. And in New Bedford, they're not so nice over there. And somehow also I have a habit of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. One cold, miserable January night, I was in New Bedford, and it had been snowing, and it was wet. and it was dark, and I was going along that street that goes north, somethingville Street, and I was actually coming south back to the road, and I forgot to stop at a stop sign, and some mean guy got me. Well, it got to be kind of serious. There was one other guy in Falmouth who got me 3 times coming on to Thomas Landers Road, and I was very glad that someone told me that once he was cleaning his gun and he shot himself in the foot, and I thought that served him right. But anyway, in 2013, it was actually 2012, late December 2012, I went to New York to go skiing with my daughter, and we were skiing, and it was 3:30 on New Year's Eve, the afternoon of New Year's Eve, and I was skiing with my grandson and my son-in-law, and they wanted to do a last run. Well, I didn't want to too much, but anyway, I went down the hill and I hit some ice and I broke my leg. And in 2013, I broke my leg into 13 pieces on New Year's Eve. They sent me to Albany Medical Center. They put me in room 513, and at 9:13 on New Year's morning, they put my leg back together, and they did a really good job, and I'm very grateful. And that January, I spent most of the month in the hospital. And when I came home, I was non-weight bearing, which I never even knew what that was before, but you can't step on your leg for 12 weeks, which is really a pain. And so I got a wonderful letter in the mail saying, "You did not show up for a hearing for speeding, and you're going to lose your license in April." So I sat in my wheelchair and I called on the telephone. I tried to call somebody, but nobody ever answered the phone. So I decided I had to find a friend to take me up to the Plymouth court. And I did get a friend. She drove me up. She dumped me out the car and dumped my wheelchair there and drove off, and I had to get myself into the courthouse. I found a clerk who was kind enough to reschedule my hearing for a few weeks later. So a few weeks later I went, and I was still in my wheelchair, and it had been advised that I hired a lawyer. So my lawyer came in her fur coat and her high heels from up around Raynham. And we waited, and finally the person that they assigned for the hearing happened to be the mother of the lawyer's secretary. And this lawyer just knew everybody, so that was great. I was free. So now I decided that I really need to be good and slow down. And I did for about 4 years until last fall. My daughter lives in Long Island, and you have to drive down 95 past New York City and over the Throgs Neck Bridge. And so I visited her, came back, and it was a beautiful Tuesday. The traffic was very light, and somehow I managed to go 90 most of the way home, and I got away with it until I got to Westport on 195, and he was a mean cop, and he gave me a ticket, and that was a real bummer. So the hearing finally, and I decided I better take my local lawyer with me this time, and the hearing was on March 2nd of 2018, and if you'll remember, that was the day of one of those northeasters, and the rain was raining and the wind was blowing, and I had to go to Fall River. So I get to Fall River, and in Fall River there's no parking at the courthouse, so I had to go down the street somewhere and walk back in my slicker. And I get to the courthouse, and I thought I should bring some water and an iPad because maybe I'd have to be sitting around for a while. Well, the guard says, you can't come in here with those, so I got to go walk all the way down the street again and put them in my car. And I get back to the courthouse, and at that point I'm sort of close to tears. But we go into the hearing, and there's a woman, and then there's a state police guy. And they hear my story, and they say, you are a chronic speeder, and we're not going to let you off. And we pleaded and pleaded because, honestly, I don't know what I could do if I didn't have my license and I couldn't drive anywhere. It would really be very tragic. And we pleaded, and I do have to thank my lawyer because finally, after a lot of pleading, and the state cop said, we can't let you off. We've had so much trouble with our overtime that we just can't have another infraction. And but finally, they put me on probation, and I'm now on probation until March 1st of 2019. And so far I've gotten through April, May, June, and part of July. And I'm going to try to be good and slow down.
Now I'd like to introduce you to one of my favorite people on the planet, Jeanne Mase, Dr. Jeanne Mase. Come on up. She's going to tell us some medical antidotes.
Antidotes or anecdotes? I'm not really sure. How is this working out? Medical antidotes. I was going to call this the ramblings of a country doctor, but I thought you'd all run screaming. So the musings of a country doctor, I thought would be better. My story starts when I was 7 years old. Am I in the right place for this?
Yeah, you're perfect.
Okay. My parents told me that I was going to Boston to get a hot dog, and being the oldest of 4 children, I thought, wow, I'm finally getting treated for being the little mother. And we went and we got a hot dog at the orange roofed Howard Johnson's. And then we proceeded to go to Children's Hospital, where I was dropped off. They said goodbye, and I was left there for an undetermined amount of time, which was terribly frightening for someone 7 years old. The walls were white, the fluorescent lights were bright, no one really spoke to me. It was very frightening. It smelled a little bit like diapers, urine, old food, and at the time the staff could smoke. So there was also the haze of smoke in the place. The children were terribly frightened. They were crying most of the time. They were homesick. They were frightened. They didn't know what was next. I was the little mother of the ward. There was one child who would bang her head incessantly on the side of her crib. There were several children who were crawling down the hallway with Canadian crutches. There were many who didn't seem to have any medical problem, who were probably left there abandoned, waiting for placement. And so I would read to them in the library. I would teach them how to crochet potholders. I don't know if you all remember potholders. And I was really good at GIMP. Anyone remember GIMP? So it was like that sort of leathery, plastic stuff that kind of held in place, and you could make bracelets with it. And I was a GIMP hoarder. I hoarded GIMP because I never knew when the next supply of GIMP was going to come in, and I had no idea how long it was there. So one day I was asked to go for an x-ray, or actually demanded to go for an x-ray, and brought down to the bowels of the hospital for my x-ray. And they said, take everything out of your pockets. And I said, not my GIMP. You're not getting it. So I left my GIMP in my pocket. And after the x-ray, as it was developing on the wall, and I was watching it was back when x-rays were developed, and I was watching it being developed, everyone came running into the room, petrified. because there was this mass of what looked like worms in my belly. It was my gimp. It was in my pocket. And then time went on, and all this time my parents were busy with my 4 siblings, so I never heard from them. And I was asked to go back to my room. And of course, 7 years old, it was like being called to the principal. It was like, what have I done now? And so I went back to my room, and I was greeted by an intern/resident who was there to take my blood. Now, you can only learn how to take blood from another human being by practicing. So these intern residents from Mass General and Children's Hospital were there to take my blood, and they could not leave until they got a sample. So I remember him stabbing here, stabbing there, stabbing again here, stabbing again there, twisting the needle, trying to make it work. It was a horror show. And at one point, I looked up at him and I was like, that nose looks like a good one to punch and get some blood, and maybe we could have this be done. So at that point in my life, at 7 years old, I decided that we could do things better. We can communicate better, can't we? We can explain to people, patients, whether they're pediatric or middle-aged or slightly demented or mentally challenged, we can communicate. We can tell them what to expect. We don't have to leave them fearful and not knowing. And I decided at 7 years old I wanted to be a doctor. So fast forward to when I was in college. I went to UMass. And I decided it would be a good idea to work at a rest home near where I lived. I could walk there, I could work a few hours, I could take care of people because I'm a caretaker. So I was the youngest person there, and there was no training at all. You didn't have to be certified to do anything. So they had me emptying bedpans, changing diapers, spoon feeding the residents, doing whatever they didn't want to do. So we finished our chores for the day, and I had an hour or 2 left. And I said, what do you want me to do? They said, why don't you go check on Ed in room 16? And I said, okay, I'll go check on Ed. So I walk in the room, and Ed is pretty much independent. He can feed himself, he can toilet himself, he kind of sits in the room and just kind of stares at the wall all day. So I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do with Ed? I'm a college student, I don't know what to do. So I said, there's a comb over there. Why don't I comb his hair? Everybody likes to have their hair done, right? I do. So I walked over and I started trying to find a few tendrils that could maybe make use of a comb and maybe like massage his scalp a little bit. And Ed looked up at me and he said, thank you. And as all this was going on, a staff member happened to be going by the door and looked in and went, and I was like, I'm in trouble again, once again. And I said, what? And they said, did Ed just say thank you? And I said, yeah. And they said, Ed hasn't spoken in the 10 years he's lived here. It's like, oh, okay. Fast forward to internship, and I'm in the trauma unit at Worcester City Hospital, terrified again, and the bell rings, there's a trauma coming in. So the gurney comes down the hall, and there's this disheveled, decrepit man who just smells like cigarettes, alcohol, urine, feces, and you can actually like see the flies going around his head. And his face is just destroyed. It's just caved in. His teeth are all foul. He's got bruises all over him. And he's our next person that we're going to take care of. Now, the people in the trauma ward, they're not bad people. They just become coarse. They see things every day. They see people self-mutilating. They see drug overdoses. They just see awful things all day long. And they become immune to it. They become coarsened. And so they're sort of talking about Ed while he's lying there in the stretcher. And they're, why did they bring him here? Why didn't they just leave him there? Why do we have to do this? Why didn't I just end my shift? And he's lying there. And because he can't speak, people assume that he can't hear. So we're all trying to do, CAT scans and x-rays and draw some blood and whatever, and nobody really wants to go near this person. And they finally all leave. They go off to do their other things, and they leave me there with Ed because I'm the youngest person there, and that's what I do. So I find a washcloth, and I'm trying to sort of, clean his hair that's caked with blood, and I'm trying to stay away from the area that's really quite destroyed. His eye socket's gone, and I'm trying to, and he mumbles something, he kind of gurgles something, and I lean in, and I don't want to lean in too close because I don't know what he's about to do, and I said, "What was that?" And I can't remember quite what he said at the time, but it was something to the effect of, "I tried to kill myself." And when we pieced the story together, Ed had actually leaped off the railroad elevation and landed on the tracks on his base. So he had tried to commit suicide and wasn't even successful at that. And when I shared the story with my colleagues, finally the tenor in the room changed a little bit, and people started to sort of take care of him and treat him with a little bit of respect. Third vignette, when I was in my practice now, and I had a patient, a lovely patient, beautiful woman, Cape Verdean, very successful, worked in the school system, still does. Her husband's in construction, wonderful couple, so kind. They adopted 2 children, and she had a condition called endometriosis, which causes pain in your pelvis and your abdomen. And it can be severe, it can be awful, it can be constant, it can cause scarring, and there's a very easy treatment. You can take the birth control pill, and it pretty much solves the problem. But she didn't want to do that. So she'd be seeing her gynecologist over and over again, different pain medications, different ideas, what have you, and nothing really worked. And he became frustrated with her. He said, "Why don't you just take this medication and make it be gone?" So finally she ended up having surgery, major surgery, removal of different parts of her body, and then looking at 6 weeks of recovery, if that, out of work, what have you. And he had pretty much been done with her. And I went into her room in the hospital to visit with her, and she invited me to sit on her bed, and I did. And I said, we talked about her children and what was going on, and I said, how can we make this better? How can we not have you in this situation again? How can we, it's just a very simple medication to take, and we could remove all of this. And I know you're not doing this for a religious reason, and we've talked about the risks and benefits, and help me understand and help you not have this happen again. And she looked at me, and a lot of my patients call me by the first name, and she said, "Jeanne?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Every time I take this pill and I put it in my mouth, it reminds me of the fact that I can't have my own children." And I was like, wow, that makes sense. So my story is to listen, because often people have an underlying story. Often they have a reason for what seems like their crazy behavior. And if you just sit for a few minutes and not think about the other things that you have to do, whatever they are, sometimes you can hear those stories and make somebody's life a little better. Thank you so much.
Okay, Paul, are you ready? I certainly am. It's always hard to be at the end. Come on up, buddy. This is Paul Dunn. Please welcome Paul Dunn.
Friday the 13th. What a great night to come out and listen to stories. Thank you so much for being here. So my story is about meeting a guy named Nutsy Belzano. Meeting Nutsy changed the course of my life completely. Maybe something like this has happened to some of you, where you meet someone and the impact of meeting a person changes the direction of your life. The year, as so many of the stories tonight have been, 1973. I'm 21 years old. I just left school, moved back home to Fall River, Massachusetts, and I needed a job. Nutsy owned a sub shop in Fall River, and he hired me. The two of us were like the odd couple. 1973, still a little hippie-ish. I had an afro out to here, beard, love beads, clogs, nutsy. He was just out of central casting. He's 45 years old, out of central casting for an Italian gangster. Wavy dark hair, olive skin, deep voice like this, and a bullet hole going through here, coming out the back, and he was never in the service. Oh yeah. I thought it odd, working that first week at Nutsy's. There were so many black Cadillacs coming over from Providence. And these guys would get out and they'd be in their black suits with their black fedoras and their black sunglasses. And they would come in and they'd sit at the counter, and Nutsy and these guys would talk in Italian. And behind them would be these big slabs of beef and these tight-fitting black suits. And they'd be glowering at everybody else in the shop. I thought it even a little more odd when the first week that I was there, Nutsy comes up and he says, "Hey, bud, we got to talk." And I go, "Okay, Nutsy, what's up?" He says, "We've got a problem with the cash register." And I, "Really, what's the matter?" He says, "Well, you got a problem with the cash register, the money and the cash register tapes." I go, "All right, well, Nutsy, what's the problem? Don't they add up?" And he starts to get a little uncomfortable, and he says, "Well, yeah, they do." And I go, "Well, Nutsy, what's the problem?" And he's starting to get really uncomfortable, and he says, "Bud, why do you think I pay you so little?" And I look at him and I go, "Nutsy, you want me to steal from you?" And he goes, "Mon Dieu," he says, "where did this kid come from, you know?" So in his experience, everybody that he hired stole from him. So he would pay them little, and they would make up the difference out of the cash drawer. Said, all right, if that will make his world easier for him. So at the end of every day, I'd open the drawer, and I'd take out a 20 or two 20s, and I'd wave it at him, and he'd go, no, I'm not supposed to see. Said, all right, and I'd say, great. And I thought it exceptionally odd that while we had roast beef sandwiches going out the front door, we had jewelry, money, and gems coming in the back door. Okay. So at this point, you might think it was a little bit strange that what direction this whole thing was going in, and where he had all these gangsters coming in. But it was a great summer for me in 1973. It was one of the greatest experiences and the learning experiences of my life. I get to meet made men and hitmen. I got to meet loose men, looser women. I got to go to the horse track over at Lincoln Downs, Rhode Island, where I won $400 on a $2 bet because the fix was in. I got to meet Raymond Patriarca, who, as most of you remember, was the head of organized crime in New England. Yeah? And I also learned a very valuable skill, which is how to open up most safes by using a bar of very hardened steel and to punch right through the tumblers. But I was all in the abstract. All right, time out. Remember at the beginning I said meeting Nutsy changed the direction of my life? I think some of you might be thinking that I turned into a criminal. Not at all. Completely the opposite. Meeting Nutsy gave me a sense of respect and responsibility for others. One time, these friends of mine came in to have lunch. And I was a big shot, and when they finished, I said, all right, it's okay. It's on me. And they were like, oh, thank you, Paul. So they left. I went about helping other customers and cleaning up. And like an hour later, Nutsy said, hey, Paul, he said, that was nice of you to take care of your friends and pay for them. And I said, yeah, it was. They're really nice people. And he said, but I don't remember seeing you take the money out of your wallet and putting it in the drawer. She read with embarrassment. He said, Paul, he said, you know, you treat people, when they come in, you can treat them to lunch. He said, but please, use your own money to do that, not mine. Lesson learned, Nutsy, thank you. Nutsy had a really soft spot for my mother. My mother used to come in for coffee or a sandwich, and as soon as he saw her car pull up, he would be out the door like a shot, open her car door, bring her into the restaurant, sit her down, give her a coffee or a sandwich, and he never charged her a cent. When she'd leave, he turned to me and he says, Paul, your mother's a classy lady, and that's how you treat a classy lady. Don't you forget it. And I'd say, I never will. Thank you so much for that, buddy. But the best lesson that Nutsy gave me was he was always after me to make something of myself, to be a better person. He would tell me, he said, Paul, I'm owned. He said, those morons in Providence, he said, they're going to own me till the day I die. He said, but you can make something yourself. He said, you got to get the heck out of Fall River, be somebody, learn, go back to school. So I had borrowed my dad's camera, and I was in the yearbook in high school and college. And so Nutsy encouraged me, so that on a Thursday, if people came in and they bought a $5 sandwich combo, I would have my bed sheet set up in the corner with my little Smith Victor hot light, and I would take their portrait. And they'd come back the next week, and I'd give them a print, and hopefully they would buy more food. And out of Nutsy keep hammering at me to make something of yourself, be somebody. I said, all right, and I applied to New England School of Photography up in Boston, got accepted, went up there, and absolutely loved photography. I ate it, slept it, drank it, smelled it, tasted it. It just took my life over, and I started a business in advertising photography and had a really successful career in Boston. Except, years later, 5, 10 years, I started thinking about Nutsy. And it's like, I never thanked Nutsy for being the role model and the inspiration to get me the hell out of Fall River. So I made some phone calls, I did some checking to see where is he. I really owed him a debt of gratitude. And unfortunately, I found out that, yes, those guys in Providence did own him. And while bringing a carload of guns up from New York to Boston, he got arrested and went to Danbury Prison, where he had a heart attack and he died. So I never got to thank him for being that wonderful inspiration, that kick in the butt, and that incredible learning experience that I got from working at his sub shop. So tonight, I want to say, thank you, Nutsy. I appreciate you, and I love you. Thanks, man.
Okay, thank you guys everybody for coming. Don't touch the mic. Okay, I'm your last storyteller. She showed up in a long, colorful peasant dress and a flowing top with a big brimmed hat, like she was going to be working in the garden, and a basket of flowers. And he was in a blue suit that was a little too tight, with a skinny little tie, must have been his favorite from a long time ago. They were in their 80s, and they were getting married. You see, I'm a justice of the peace for the state of Massachusetts, so I have the privilege of performing a lot of weddings on Cape Cod. And I remember when she called. She called and she had that voice that told me she was older. And she said, would you be able to marry us at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday? I know it's an odd time, but 4 o'clock on a Wednesday at Bourne Farm. And I said, absolutely. How many people will be in attendance? She said, just us and our best friends. I said, terrific. So tell me your story. She said, well, I'm 82 and he's 84. And instantly I thought, oh, such hope. And she said, I remember him from high school when he would clickety-clack down the hall in his cleats. He was a football player. And he'd carry his leather cap because it was before helmets. And every once in a while, he'd look over at me at my locker, and I'd catch the glimpse. Oh, she said, I loved him then, but I played in the band, and the football players didn't hang with the band girls. I think it's still the same today. Anyway, I said, oh, it's so romantic. That's such a romantic story. So why did you wait till 80 or whatever to get married? She said, well, he went off to war, and we never spoke in high school. I married, he married, we had children. We married again, had more children. And at our 55th high school anniversary reunion, we met again. And we've been together ever since. So I said, oh, I'm so touched. I'm so happy to do this for you. I can't wait to see you a month from now on a Wednesday at 4 o'clock at the Bourne Farm. This will be fun. And she's like, thank you, honey. I can't either. So I was truly excited. This is like true romance after all these years, and they have a shared history, which was so neat. And they had 7 years together since that reunion. So I knew it was going to last. And then I get the call. She says, oh, I'm so sorry. I hate to disturb you, and I hate to do this, but we've called off the wedding. I said, Peg, oh, okay. You know, I didn't want to pry. Okay. Well, you know, I'm sorry. Keep me posted. A few days pass, and I'm really bothered by it. Her girlfriend was my girlfriend, so I called her up, and I said, hey, what's going on with Peg? What happened? She goes, oh, you know what? She's a little embarrassed that she called off the wedding. If you called her just to check in, it may still be a go. I said, okay. So I called her. I said, Peg, you know, I'm a social worker at Hart, and I was so intrigued by your love story, and I just want to check in. Are you okay? And she said, oh, you know what? I got to tell you, I think we still want to do it. Do you still have time? And I said, yeah, I'll see you there, 3 o'clock on a Wednesday at the Bourne Farm, the 4 of you. I'm in. So she showed up in this beautiful outfit, looking like a throwback from Woodstock. And he, like the financial advisor from Wall Street that he was. And they cried through the whole ceremony, which, by the way, makes me cry because I'm a softie. And it was absolutely beautiful. And I took the wedding photos because they didn't have a photographer. And as is customary, I sent out my happy first Christmas to all my brides and grooms, brides and brides. And occasionally I'll get back a Christmas card with a picture of the wedding or the first baby or, you know, the house they bought or whatever. But this time he called me. And he said, Justice Cool, which always sounds so funny. Justice Cool, we so appreciated that card. It really was the best day of our lives. And you were so gracious to deal with us through all the trouble. And I just want to tell you that you really made the day special. And I said, well, thank you. So how's it going? He said, well, you know when Peg called and canceled the wedding? I said, yeah. She goes, well, she had just gotten diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I said, oh, gosh, I am so sorry. And she didn't want to burden me with her dying, which I thought was completely unfair of her to make that decision for me. So I got down on one knee and I said to her, honey, let me escort you out. And that's how we ended up married. She's died between the holidays, and we had 3 beautiful months together, and I escorted her out. To which I said, I love my job, I love my job, I love my job, because isn't that what love's about? I'm going to say thank you so much for coming tonight, and I hope your loved ones are here to escort you out.